Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about the fight review, and I thought that I would talk about the fight that, of course, ended up happening between that of Zhilei Big Bang Zhang versus that of Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder. And, of course, for those of you that are not connecting the dots with this picture, Deontay Wilder, of course, was stopped against that of the Big Bang Zhang against Zhilei Big Bang Zhang, which is pretty much what I had predicted. I got my fight prediction correct to a T, which, of course, actually, some of my predictions have been a little bit more on the wrong side within the past several months, with some of the bigger fights. So, of course, it's good to at least get this prediction right, but I did end up going with that of Zhang within this fight. And the reason why is because even though there's certain things that Deontay Wilder might be able to beat Zhang in terms of athleticism, in terms of a technical standpoint, there was really nothing that, in my view, that Deontay Wilder beat that of Zhilei Zhang in. I don't think that he had the better head movement. I don't think that he had the better defense. I don't think that he had the better lead hand or the better jab. I don't think that he had the better footwork. Once again, if you watched my full breakdown, which probably was about an hour long, watching footage of both Deontay Wilder and Zhilei Zhang, you know that what I said is that the advantages that Deontay Wilder was going to have was that he was maybe going to have punching power over that of Zhilei Zhang. He was going to have that of hand speed and also that of foot speed at times. But in terms of a technical standpoint, there was going to be nothing that Deontay Wilder beat Zhilei Zhang in, not one particular item. There was not one piece of technique that Deontay Wilder beat Zhilei Zhang in. And even had this fight happen several years ago, when Deontay Wilder would have been more in the peak and in the prime of his career, I'm not really quite sure if he would have beat this guy anyway. And a lot of people are going to be asking this question, and this is always the question that is asked when certain fighters end up getting beaten when they're a little bit older. Did they end up just losing that spark? Are they not quite the same anymore? Or were they just never really that good in the first place? Well, I think that when you talk about Deontay Wilder, his career is going to be a very interesting one when we take a look back on it, because the fact that he really didn't face a whole lot of the top contenders throughout his career, which I'm not completely blaming on him. Do I think that, of course, he could have fought maybe some other guys in certain fights like a Dillian White or maybe some other guys and maybe tried a little bit harder to get the AJ fight in Britain if he really wanted the fight as badly as what the Deontay Wilder fans always try to allege? Yeah, personally I do. But of course AJ created some stumbling blocks as well in terms of trying to make that fight. And it's not like Deontay Wilder didn't try to get some other fights. To be fair, Alexander Povetkin, he did pop up for steroids and PEDs when that fight was about to be set up, and Joseph Parker, from what I remember, turned down that fight in order to take that of the AJ Anthony Joshua fight, which would have not been a cherry pick or a duck. It just would have been against the fighter that probably would have had more belts at the time, or it would have been a unification, and the guy that, on top of that, would have been way more worth the risk because of the amount of reward that you were going to get from defeating Anthony Joshua. People forget that at that time that Anthony Joshua, that he was the face of boxing. But Deontay Wilder, his career is going to be a very interesting one when we take a look back at it, because I don't really know how great Deontay Wilder actually is. Of course, he has a couple of decent wins in his career. He has the win over Bermane Stiverne. Of course, he was able to beat Luis Ortiz, one of the top contenders of his time, in two separate situations, where, of course, Wilder, to be quite honest with you, he looked like shit in both of those fights. But Deontay Wilder, when it comes down to it, once again, his career is going to be very particularly interesting, because is it going to be looked at as a complete hype job, or is he going to be looked at as someone that, unfortunately, we just didn't get to see him in a good enough amount of fights, and then eventually he pretty much just went over the hill? We don't really know. So, once again, it's going to be very particularly interesting to see how his career is going to be remembered. But if you're asking me, how would I remember Deontay Wilder? I think that once again, at one point in time, that perhaps he was an A grade level heavyweight fighter. But if you were going to bring up the point about, well, we really don't know how great Deontay Wilder actually is, and I personally think that he's a hype job, I mean, I can't completely disagree with you. I mean, a lot of the channels that I tend to review, especially whenever a fighter ends up losing, at the end of their career, they love to state that they were never as great as what they were, meant to be in the first place. Whether it be Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez or Gennady Golovkin, or whether it be Devin Haney, or whether it be, that Manny Pacquiao, Vasily Lomachenko, Canelo Alvarez, some other guys. Well, if we're going to call these guys hype jobs, which in my view none of those guys actually are, what does that make Deontay Wilder? Because Deontay Wilder, no offense against him, but what great wins does he really have within his career? I mean, when Deontay Wilder was getting those title defenses, his fans, especially within that of the LDBC and new media, they were starting to acclaim him not only as one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world, and this is why I never acclaimed Deontay Wilder to be within my top 10 pound-for-pound list, maybe at the most top 20 pound-for-pound at one point in time, because Deontay Wilder just never really defeated anybody. Because once again, what can we really tell about Deontay Wilder's career? The only wins that he really has in his career that are of any substance are pretty much the Bermain Stavern wins and also that of the Luis Ortiz wins. To be honest with you, that's really about it. Because of course we know that against Tyson Fury that he really should have lost on all 3 occasions. Of course he faced Joseph Parker when Joseph Parker had already lost multiple times. Same with Deontay Wilder. So that was a fight that heading into that fight, Wilder was supposed to win, but he got thoroughly embarrassed when it came down to it. So basically that's not going to look great in his career. And then of course he fought this guy Zhilei Zhang, a guy that I believe that has been maybe in a couple of title eliminators, ended up losing a narrow decision to that of both Joseph Parker and that of Philip Hrgovic. You know, maybe some of you would debate that Zhang deserved to win those fights. But either way, a guy that was very particularly dangerous and a guy that was very particularly challenging and a guy that is really not going to give you that much reward. So I'll at least give Deontay Wilder this amount of credit for fighting this guy. But he pretty much had to, because I think that Deontay Wilder knew that he was going to have to get through some sort of obstacle if he was going to get to AJ Anthony Joshua. I think that Deontay Wilder at this point, that really his only goal was to try to get that AJ Anthony Joshua fight, because I think that if Deontay Wilder wanted to prove something of this era, that if he was not going to be the best heavyweight of his generation, that at least he was always better than the guy that a lot of people compared him to, which is going to be that of AJ Anthony Joshua. Once again, for those of you that don't go that far back, AJ Anthony Joshua versus Wilder at one point in time was one of the biggest fights in boxing. It no longer is because of the multitude of losses that both fighters have suffered, but especially ever since Deontay Wilder has lost to that of Joseph Parker, the esteem of that fight pretty much has been pulled out, because why really is there a reason for that fight to happen anymore? Deontay Wilder is coming off of 2 dominating losses when it comes down to it. Of course, his last win, he was able to knock out that of Robert Elenius. But once again, this fight pretty much went down how I thought that it was going to go. I predicted Zhilei Zhang to get a knockout because I said that maybe early we would see possibly either or fighter be a little bit more active. It was Deontay Wilder within out of the first round, which is pretty much kind of what I predicted. Wilder will be a little bit more active within the first, or second round a little bit, and then he'll slow down, especially if you show high level IQ. And in the first round, Zhang really wasn't quite throwing enough. But then in the second round, Zhang, and I stated this, by the way, in my video, that Zhang, that for the first time, Deontay Wilder always stated within his fights that you have to be perfect for a full 12 rounds. I only have to be perfect for 1 second. Well, this is going to be the first time in Deontay Wilder's career that he was finally going to deal with another fighter that had anywhere near the same level of power as him, or at least overall very comparable type of power. Zhang, you can tell that, yes, he has size, but he also can just naturally hit. Like this dude, this dude can hit like a truck. This dude, when I seen him against Joe Joyce, when I seen him against Joseph Parker, when I seen him against Philip Hrgovic, he was able to knock every single one of those fighters down. And those fighters are not known for having weak chins. So once again, Zhang is not a dude, once again, that punches light. He's not just some sort of size bully. This dude has legitimate A-plus level power. And I told that, and I think that one guy, I think that his name is Bud Gonna Stop Canelo, a person that I had a conversation with on my channel previously, decent guy. But, he stated overall that Zhang doesn't have anywhere near the level of power that Wilder does. He said, let's be real. Well, yes, he does. And it was proven, because the first flush punch that Zhang ended up landing on Deontay Wilder's face, where Deontay Wilder was countered, and it was the exact same punch that I thought that Zhang was eventually going to get Deontay Wilder with, which was that overhook over the top with that right hook, that excellent right hook that he has. Wilder, of course, advertised his right hand like usual. He stuck the jab out there, and then he tried to throw the right hand down the pipe. Zhang backed up a little bit, in a little bit of an angle. He had a pull counter, and he threw a right hook right across Deontay Wilder's face, and it didn't even hit completely flush. It only hit a little bit within the tip of his nose, or I believe a little bit in the tip of his face. But that was enough for Deontay Wilder to be so off kilter that he actually turned his back on that of Zhilei Zhang, and with his hands down looking at the referee, more than likely expecting a behind the head call or something like that. or at least just very surprised because he didn't know what he got hit with. Then Zhang, of course, hit him with another right hand, and it pretty much was all over from then. Now, one could debate maybe that Deontay Wilder, that he could have been given more time, but to be quite honest with you, Deontay Wilder, in my view, he would have been put down very badly had this fight continued. You never know because Deontay Wilder is a big puncher, so you could always try to give him a puncher's chance. You never know. But at the end of the day, I think that it probably was the right stoppage. Deontay Wilder was in no condition, in my view, overall, to probably continue this fight. And once again, the question will always be about Deontay Wilder's career is that how how overall was Wilder? How good was he? And of course, you've seen at the news at the top there where it said Zhang stunned Wilder, from ESPN. But anyways, once again, the question will be is that how will Deontay Wilder's career be remembered? And do I believe that this was more because Deontay Wilder, that he was a little bit more aged out and that he just doesn't have the killer instinct anymore, that he doesn't have the spark? I think that maybe a part of it is because Deontay Wilder doesn't have the same level of confidence anymore. And I think that that was always a big part of the Deontay Wilder facade, is that when you talk about certain fighters like that, they always have to fight with brawling confidence. They always have to fight with great confidence. And I don't think that Deontay Wilder has that anymore. Not just after the Tyson Fury losses, but also after the Joseph Parker loss. And this was going to be a hell fight for Deontay Wilder because this was a guy that also could not come out at any given time. He was technically better than Deontay Wilder, and Wilder at times was going to feel that power and he was going to feel that weight. And eventually he did. I thought Wilder probably won the first round, and to be honest, every round after that, I gave the Mr. Zhilei Zhang, or Zhang, whatever you want to, however you want to pronounce it. When it comes down to it. But anyways, once again, Deontay Wilder, in my view, a part of the reason why he lost this fight was because, sure, there's a part of him that may not have that same spark anymore. Ever since the Tyson Fury fights, he doesn't have that same level of confidence anymore. Could have Deontay Wilder won this fight? Could he have won this fight had it been several years ago, all the way back in 2018 or something like that when he was undefeated, knocking out guys like Dominic Breazeale and all those guys? Yeah, sure, he could, but we're never going to know the answer because, once again, how many technically great fighters has Deontay Wilder really ever fought within that of the heavyweight division? He's fought Tyson Fury, he's fought Joseph Parker, he's fought Zhilei Zhang, and he's fought Luis Ortiz. That really is about it. And out of all those fighters that I mentioned, he's only ever beat one of those fighters. So that pretty much shows you, once again, the lack of technique and boxing IQ that Deontay Wilder has. I'm not going to state overall that Deontay Wilder is a complete hype job, but in terms of in the conversation of the most overrated heavyweight fighter of all time, yeah, he's definitely in that conversation. He has to be. Because the way that people were ranking him, especially the LDBC and new media channels, yes, absolutely, he has to be up there. Not even just them, but Boxing Rec at certain times, putting them, of course, Boxing Rec is a terrible website in terms of rankings. They have very inconsistent and not and just terrible rankings. But when it comes down to it, overall, they've always had a bad pound per pound list. But they even put Deontay Wilder at one point in time on their top 10 pound per pound list. Even when I believe he suffered the loss to that of a Tyson Fury. But once again, the way that Deontay Wilder was being ranked, and talked about that he was on the level of top 10 heavyweights of all time. And I get it, he was having those title defenses, but it's just interesting because a lot of the channels that I end up watching, whether they're from the LDBC or whether they have other narratives or other racial, overall narratives, depending on what demographic they may be, when a certain fighter loses, then they're a complete hype job that they especially don't like. But then when it comes to one of their favorite fighters, then they make all sort of excuses. So the question will be from the LDBC and new media, is Deontay Wilder a complete hype job? Or is he a guy that you're going to make excuses for and basically state that he doesn't have the same spark anymore and that he's a bit older? And to be quite fair, he probably doesn't have the same spark anymore, and he definitely is a little bit older. Deontay Wilder is not a spring chicken anymore. But at the end of the day, Deontay Wilder, I think that once you start losing in your career, and once you start to lose a little bit more of that spark, usually the more faults within your style are going to be exposed because the athleticism starts to wane. And I think that Deontay Wilder, the more confidence that he lacks, the worse it's going to be for him because he's just never been a technically superior fighter. In terms of a fighter, in terms of a technique standpoint, he's probably about a B minus to a C plus level fighter. I mean, honestly, there's certain guys that probably are in the boxing gym that probably are about a level or two above boxing skill in terms of Deontay Wilder. And I don't mean to try, to sound over exaggerative or, I don't mean to try to sound very rude when I state that, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Deontay Wilder is a guy to where, his athleticism has really helped him and gotten him out of a lot of situations. And he finally met a multitude of boxers to where it wasn't eventually going to be allowed. It just is what it is. And once again, Zhang, he's a guy that is technically superior to Deontay Wilder in every single way. He throws better feints. He changes levels better than Deontay Wilder. He has better defense than Deontay Wilder. When it comes down to it, he may even have more power than that of Deontay Wilder. I'm not quite sure if he has more power than Deontay Wilder, but it's probably pretty close. And once that pretty much was in, and I was watching the highlights, and I was taking a look at the lead hand and also the trouble that Deontay Wilder has setting up the right hand at times because he is so overall exaggerative with that right hand at times. He really advertises it in the bow stance. That pretty much told me everything that I needed to know. That eventually I predicted that Zhang was going to land something against that of Deontay Wilder that was really massively going to hurt him. And it did, and it was, like I stated, more than likely going to be that right hook. And eventually Deontay Wilder, of course, he tried to be a little bit more active within that 5th round. But I stated, is that going to help Deontay Wilder or is that going to be his doom? Because Zhang is not a stupid fighter. This guy is decently technically sound. He's a bit older. He's a bit slower. He doesn't have great stamina, but he can box. He was able to completely dominate Joe Joyce on 2 separate occasions. He had narrow losses to Joseph Parker and also that of Filip Hrgovic. Zhang is not Zhang is not something to fuck around with. And if Deontay Wilder was not careful within this fight, because even though he has a good chin, he's not a guy that has a granite chin. He can be knocked out. All right, it is what it is. And Zhang hit him with the right hand, of course, and then, of course, he hit him with the right hook again, and that was pretty much it. It just is what it is. Good night, Irene. But, it's whatever. But Deontay Wilder, of course, I respect him as a fighter throughout his career. I do believe that at one point in time, he probably was an A-grade level fighter. But the question is about Deontay Wilder is that where really was he for his generation? He's definitely not the best heavyweight of his generation. He can't be on the same level as a Tyson Fury or an Alexander Usyk or possibly even an AJ Anthony Joshua. He can't really be on their level. The question is about Deontay Wilder. Even with all the title defenses, it's like, is he really even on the same level as a Andy Ruiz or a Joseph Parker or some of these other guys? I mean, because Deontay Wilder probably doesn't even have the resume of those guys. And on top of that, he's definitely not as skilled in my view as either of those fighters. So it's like, is Deontay Wilder really above those guys? Where do we really rank Deontay Wilder in terms of heavyweight history? Now, of course, his supporters, they'll claim that, he was cheated out of a career because Tyson Fury allegedly cheated, which, of course, there's never been any empirical evidence for, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, Deontay Wilder was always a guy that was extremely dangerous, and he was always to be massively respected. But in terms of a technique, he really was never that good. It just is what it is. He was never an elite level technician. And I always told people this. People said that Deontay Wilder needed to be more aggressive. Wilder is a guy to where he feels like he needs to set you up. You notice this with a lot of limited boxers, especially if if they're not comfortable within that of the boxing ring, that a lot of the times, even if they're known as bully fighters, they try to set you up overall on that of the back foot. They don't like to always go on the front foot. Because going on the front foot a lot of the times takes a little bit more skill at times than fighting on that of the back foot at times. Because what that means is that you have more of an opportunity to run into stuff. So you're going to have to change your levels a little bit more. You're going to have to do a little bit better. You're going to have to throw certain feints. You're going to have to be a little bit better on that of the front foot. Deontay Wilder is not a good front foot fighter. He's also not very good on the back foot. It is what it is. Deontay Wilder is a guy to where he basically has to keep you in range on the back foot, because that's what his success rate is. But if you push him up completely up against the ropes, he's not going to be too great. And if you make him come forward a little bit too much, it's of course going to give him a little bit of confidence. So of course he's going to be better a little bit on the front foot, the whole time if you give him that confidence, than what he would be on the back foot. But Deontay Wilder is not really super great on the front foot. He's also not super great on the back foot either. But what Wilder really would prefer to do is for you to run into his right hand. That's pretty much what Wilder would prefer for you to do. He will go on the front foot if he has to, but what Wilder would prefer, once again, is for you to run into his right hand or just let him bully you, and to pretty much be on the front foot the whole entire time and break you down. But if you prove, once again, that you have great, ire, and that overall that if you have great toughness and on top of that great boxing ability, he more than likely is not going to beat you. It just is what it is. And that was shown here. That was shown against Fury. That was shown against Joseph Parker. So to be quite honest with you, I don't really know where Deontay Wilder ranks for his career. I don't really know where he ranks for his era. He definitely can't be with the Tyson Furies or the Alexander Usyks. I don't think that there's any question about that. He probably also can't be with AJ Anthony Joshua because AJ Anthony Joshua clearly has better technique and is a more skilled boxer. It isn't like, in my view, that AJ is the most skilled heavyweight that I've ever seen, but he's at least a decent A-grade level skilled heavyweight. His resume is way better than Deontay Wilder's, in my view. And on top of that, he's won more belts throughout his whole entire career. So we can't really have a debate anymore about who was the better fighter between Wilder and that of AJ Anthony Joshua. I think that it's abundantly clear who was the greater fighter out of those two. Where Wilder has to be debated is probably between Joseph Parker and Andrew Ruiz and Dillian Whyte and those guys. That's probably where he has to be debated. And Dillian Whyte never even won the official title, but there's no offense against Deontay Wilder, but it's like the title that he won against Bermane Stiverne. How many of the heavyweights around today do we think that really would have lost to that version of Bermane Stiverne? Do we really think that that version of Bermane Stiverne would have beat Joseph Parker or Dillian Whyte or Andrew Ruiz? I don't think that he would have beat any of them, just in my personal view. It is what it is. The heavyweight division really did not get more talented until Fury, Wilder, and AJ Anthony Joshua all in unison started to kind of pop up within that division. By the time that, Vladimir Klitschko, kind of was in reign, the heavyweight division, in my view, was a decent amount weaker. It is what it is. This generation, even though, of course, you can point to certain flaws that certain fighters do, depending on the fighter, it's way better in terms of the level of competition than what it was 10 years ago. When Tyson Fury had defeated Vladimir Klitschko, that pretty much was the signaling of a new era, and ever since then, the competition level had really upended overall in terms of the level of competition. So in my view, Wilder, even though he's a very decent fighter, and he's a guy that probably is a Hall of Famer, at the end of the day, do I believe that Wilder is an all-time great fighter? No, probably not. It just is what it is. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see where Mr. Big Zhang Bang Zhang goes from here. Where do I believe both fighters go from here? Well, as for Deontay Wilder, I really don't see what else left you have to prove in your career. You're a guy that started boxing at the age of 19. Yes, there's other guys that, overall have been more successful, at boxing when, they started a little bit later than Deontay Wilder, but it is what it is. He did have about 10 title defenses. He was one of the more entertaining boxers to watch throughout that in all of boxing. He is a guy that at one point in time won the belt. He did give Tyson Fury a little bit of a scare, in 2 out of the main 3 fights. So Deontay Wilder definitely deserves respect, but in my view, it's pretty much time for him to hang it up. I just don't see overall what else he has to really left to prove. Maybe if this was a close fight, maybe if, he had won against Zhang, or maybe if the fight was a split decision or something like that, then maybe I would urge for Deontay Wilder to continue. And of course, that's obviously not my decision, but just in my personal view, what would I like to see Deontay Wilder do? I would like to see Wilder continue fighting, but I just think that his time is up. I don't think that it would be smart for him to continue fighting. I don't think overall that he's meant to continue fighting. Deontay Wilder, when it comes down to it, he had his time in my view, and now it's pretty much past him. It just is what it is. As for Zhang, we'll see what ends up happening, but apparently I'm hearing rumors that he could potentially face AJ Anthony Joshua. And let me tell you what, that's a very tough fight because either man in that fight could potentially win that fight. If AJ gets hit by the wrong shot, he could potentially end up going down within that fight. Zhang is a dude to where he's nothing to mess around with. All right, this guy could easily defeat potentially any one of the heavyweights there. Zhang is one of those guys to where, you may not favor him against the best of the best, but he could potentially beat any of the best of the best. Because not only is he a guy that has excellent power and athleticism, at least in terms of his power level, but on top of that, he has decent technique as well. So at any given time, would I favor Zhang probably over Usyk or Fury at their best? Probably not. But if he ended up defeating those guys, I wouldn't be super heavily surprised. So once again, Zhang, overall, this dude is very dangerous, and it's going to be interesting to see who's actually willing to fight him. Because who wants to fight a big Chinese dude overall to where you're not going to get a whole lot of reward for fighting this guy, when it comes down to it. And on top of that, you could potentially lose a title shot. I don't know a whole lot of people that are actually going to be willing to fight this guy, but we'll see actually what ends up happening. Maybe we could see a rematch with Parker. Maybe we could see Zhang versus Andy Ruiz. Maybe we could see something a little bit more. I don't know. We'll have to see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Or maybe a rematch with Hrgovic. Maybe that's the fight that we need to see next. but we'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank y'all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later. And as for the Filip Hrgovic versus Danny Dubois fight, of course, for those of you that did not see, Filip Hrgovic did end up losing to that of Danny Dubois, which surprised me a little bit, but I'm not majorly shocked because because like I always said about Filip Hrgovic, in my view, he was always a little bit of an overrated fighter. He's a guy that, is talented, but he also is stiff as a ton of bricks at times. He overextends certain punches, and that's also a big part of the reason why Danny Dubois, who at this point in his career has been stopped twice, why he was able to defeat Filip Hrgovic and eventually, I believe stop him. So it is what it is. So, I'm a little bit surprised, but not shocked by it because I was expecting Filip Hrgovic to be the fresher fighter. I was expecting his power to affect Danny Dubois a little bit more, but give Danny Dubois credit. He showed great resolve within this fight. And also, he probably, I'm not going to say killed the narratives, but at least suspended the narratives of him being a quitter and mentally weak. So I'll give Danny Dubois that amount of credit. This definitely was a big win for him. And apparently he's going to fight AJ Anthony Joshua next. Do I believe that he's going to defeat AJ Anthony Joshua? No, I don't. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.